Giving a notable character a big screen demise worthy of their station isn't easy, and these films all promptly drop the ball for one reason or another. So let's dive in. I'm Adam, this is Whatculture, and here are huge movie deaths that totally fell flat. Javerts, Les Misérables. Inspector Javerts' suicide in the stage version of Les Misérables is one of its most dramatic high points, a tragic and devastating moment in which a man at the end of his rope hurls himself into the River Seine. But as operatic as Tom Hooper's big-budget screen adaptation of the hit musical was, this moment landed with only unintentionally comical impact, in the most literal sense. Even ignoring the mixed reviews for Russell Crowe's vocal performance, in the very least he's clearly pouring his heart into the dramatic meat of the scene, of conveying Javerts' inner turmoil and desperation. But what sinks the moment in record time? The completely ridiculous bone crunch sound effect that's deployed after Javerts sails through the air and makes contact with the fountain below. It's all scored by intensely dramatic music and only makes this feel that much more jarring in an otherwise classy and meticulously crafted movie. Despite being widely mocked online though, the scene didn't stop the film from receiving a Best Sound Mixing Oscar nomination.
Film and TV is cool, but you know what else is cool? Protecting your privacy online. Scan the QR code or click the link in the description and get up to 76% off a 2-year NordVPN plan, plus 3 months free if you sign up today. I'd make that deal. Damn good deal.
James T. Kirk, Star Trek Generations. Captain James T. Kirk is one of the most iconic characters in all of pop culture, and while the idea of killing him off in a Star Trek movie certainly wasn't sacrilegious, the filmmakers absolutely needed to make it count. And, oh boy, Star Trek Generations was marketed as a Trekkie's dream movie, a crossover event which, through dimensional hooey not worth worrying about, teamed Captain Kirk up with the next generation's Captain Jean-Luc Picard. This ends up being just a small sliver of the movie though, and culminates with Kirk's demise while fighting to stop the villainous Soren. A sacrificial death to prevent a terrorist from wiping out an entire planetary system sounds like a fitting end for Kirk on paper, but as the saying goes, it's all about the execution. Kirk dies during the final battle when the bridge he's climbing up collapses, causing him to fall and be fatally crushed by it. Even with Shatner's memorable, ambiguous final utterance of, "Oh my," it was such an unceremonious, anticlimactic end to a legendary character. It's all the more startling when you appreciate that this was actually a reshoot, as test audiences questioned Kirk's original death where Soren simply shot him in the back. President Whitmore, Independence Day Resurgence. US President Whitmore's iconic rallying speech in the original Independence Day is well known to those who have never even seen the movie, so if he was to receive a sacrificial death in the belated sequel, it sure as hell needed to mean something. About that. Near the end of the movie, Whitmore decides to lay down his life, performing a kamikaze attack on the alien harvester queen by flying a ship towards her and detonating a bomb. Even with Bill Pullman's mildly kick-ass one-liner send-off, on behalf of the people of Earth, happy 4th of July, this was a hugely underwhelming death for such an awesome character. All the more so given that it didn't actually kill the queen, but simply force her out into the open. Whitmore dying a hero's death wasn't a terrible idea in isolation, but it ended up feeling like a totally unnecessary afterthought devoid of all emotion and excitement. Hell, even Whitmore's pre-death speech couldn't hold a candle to his monologue from the original. Padmé Amidalas, Star Wars: Revenge of the Sith. It wasn't exactly a secret that Padmé Amidalas was going to die at the end of the Star Wars prequel trilogy's capping entry, Revenge of the Sith, but the manner in which she croaked, well... A heavily pregnant Padmé is critically injured while trying to persuade Anakin back to the light side, when he force chokes her unconscious. Padmé stays alive long enough to deliver her twins, Luke and Leia, before dying, and a medical droid literally tells Obi-Wan that she was medically healthy and simply lost the will to live. Basically, Padmé died of a broken heart, an explanation which nevertheless settles as pretty flimsy for many Star Wars fans. Given that Padmé's death is one of the most important events in the history of Star Wars, for it to feel so vague and wishy-washy was a huge disappointment, which fans continue to complain about to this very day. Superman, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice isn't a very good movie, and even its bolder storytelling choices ultimately feel so obviously misguided and ill-advised. Namely, Zack Snyder's decision to kill Superman at the end of the film during the climactic clash against Doomsday. The death of Superman is an iconic and pivotal comic book arc in the history of DC, and there was certainly an audience appetite to see it brought to glossy live-action life. This soon, though, not a chance. After all, Batman v Superman was only Henry Cavill's second time playing Superman, and Superman dying could have been a supremely emotional and impactful moment if it felt earned, no matter that audiences knew his resurrection was inevitable. But by speedrunning through this whole arc, it landed with a thud of indifference. It didn't help at all that the final scene heavily teased Superman's resurrection before his body had even been buried, whereas leaving his fate up in the air between movies would have likely stoked more intrigue for the Justice League follow-up. Mufasa, the Lion King. Mufasa's death in the original animated version of The Lion King is one of the most devastating and traumatic death scenes of all cinema, and so 2019's live-action remake certainly had its work cut out replicating the same level of emotion. But even with Jon Favreau at the helm, this CGI iteration of the legendary scene just felt so soulless and lacking. A big part of the problem is that the ultra-photorealistic renditions of Mufasa, Scar, and Simba rob these characters of the expressiveness they had in the original animation. By striving so hard to be realistic, it feels less real, emotionally speaking. On top of this, basically everything about the scene is worse this time around. Scar's utterance of "Long live the king," the swipe which sends Mufasa falling to his death, Mufasa's comical falling scream, and even Simba's terrified "No!" Even with the audience's inbuilt affection for this story, Mufasa's death roused a fraction of the heartbreak that it did in the 1994 animation, which really highlights the problem with the whole movie. It feels like an obligatory product rather than a story someone genuinely wanted to tell. Mystique, Dark Phoenix. Even ignoring the fact that audience enthusiasm for Fox's X-Men franchise had all but evaporated leading up to Dark Phoenix's belated release, the film made desperately little effort to make viewers feel even a flicker of emotion for Mystique's mid-film death. As Jean Grey's Phoenix powers grow ever more unstable, the other X-Men attempt to bring her under control, leading to Jean having an outburst which catapults Mystique into a piece of exposed debris, mortally wounding her. It's a total damp squib of a death scene for many reasons: the clumsy staging, utter lack of a dynamic between Jean and Mystique, and being blatantly spoiled in trailers months before the movie's release. Yet perhaps the biggest issue of all is Jennifer Lawrence herself, who was so clearly over the franchise by this point. The reactions of the other X-Men to her demise also seems strangely clipped, further robbing the scene of the expected emotion. It is, in its own way, an apt metaphor for the movie itself, a climactic event which few could convince themselves to care about. Merlin, Kingsman, The Golden Circle. As sequels to great movies go, Kingsman: The Golden Circle is just a carnival of poor creative decisions, and Merlin's climactic sacrificial death surely didn't help. When Eggsy and Merlin arrive at villain Poppy's lush hideout, Eggsy accidentally steps on a landmine, at which point Merlin decides to switch places with him, and then detonates the mine, obliterating himself and Poppy's surrounding goons. Even Mark Strong's spirited rendition of "Take Me Home, Country Roads" in Merlin's final moments couldn't save this one from being a total flop. In a movie that already pointlessly killed off another likable hero, Roxy, Merlin's death was a massive letdown. It was too good a character to waste on this nonsense. And more to the point, given that this film established that death means nothing in the Kingsman franchise, what with Harry Hart being resurrected in highly convoluted fashion, why should we even take Merlin's apparent demise seriously?